This is the first edition, that is part A of the Khoodeelaar campaign, World Exclusive Diagnosis of Fleet Street. Now that's a kind of insinuated headline by the Daily Star, which can't resist that kind of wording and splashing on the front page. And it's significant that they are running the item featuring the football player Marcus Rashford at page 1, but just less than half the size of the one about Viagra sales up 40% as the Brits get the EU whatever. Now this is Marcus Rashford, who's got his Twitter account declaring that he has got an MBE. So the MBE is the member of the British Empire, of course. And in case anyone thought that he was independent of the process of political stoogery and, in his case, ethnic kind of indoctrination, not as severe as has been exposed and exhibited in the likes of the now frequently referred to comedian, so-called Lenny Henry. But his tweet today, this morning, has actually removed all doubts as to where he is getting. His tweet reads very much like it has been written by the Spin Machine at number 10 Downing Street, and it doesn't actually even refer to the fact of poverty and hunger and starvation. So it is a spin, and Marcus Rashford has been launched as an extension of the propaganda for the image of Boris Johnson. Because his tweet reads, let's see what his tweet actually. So Marcus Rashford's tweet 38 minutes ago, which is just after 1100 hours GMT, reads, "Just had a good conversation with the Prime Minister. He has assured me that he is committed to correcting the issue with the food hampers and that a full review of the supply chain is taking place. He agrees that images of hampers being shared on Twitter are unacceptable." Now, that is not a real human being writing this. This is a machine produced spin put on Marcus Rashford's Twitter account as if he has written it. He could not have written it. That is part one. Part two is, if he has written all of it, then his brain has gone already. So, what we have said in the tweet, in reply to Don Foster doing the promotion for this tweet tweet on the Marcus Rashford MBE Twitter account, we have posted our tweet at 11:42 GMT, and it says, "Read the language. It is machine-produced propaganda piece by those who want to deny the poverty they cause. If Rashford has written it, or all of it, then his brains are in Johnson's cabal's control already." Now that's the first of our 4 tweets that we shall be posting later. And this is something that matters because Rashford has been given too much publicity based on the assumption that he is genuine and he has thought up the whole thing by himself about poverty and school meals and all the rest of it. But if this tweet and the context of the contacts and all the conversation exchanges preceding this tweet are taken into full account, then Rashford's brains have gone already. And there is we go back to the Fleet Street so-called papers, and they are promoting the vaccination propaganda by putting a big picture containing Jeremy Clarkson's rallying cry as he joins volunteer front line, Jab's army. And the word jazz is the opposite sense of the word jazz they used against Jeremy Corbyn. And they're saying that on page 4 and 5, that stricter curbs on cards if flouting does not end. And what they're saying is that lock around the clock, that will be locked down around the clock. That's what they're saying. Now, they're not saying that Boris Johnson should be prosecuted for traveling 7 miles to Stratford in Newham from Downing Street in Southwest 1. And there is an editorial. There are 3 editorial comments on the Sun. Now, the Sun, the full description of the Sun, as we said yesterday again, is the dirty digger Rupert Murdoch controlled scum. And that is based on the entirety of the role played by the same title called the Sun. We call it scum because of its corrupt behavior, corrupt content, and corrupt orientation. So in order to save time and in order to kind of avoid having to explain every time what the edited title, the scum, means, we shall, in context of the explanation of the disclaimer, we shall refer to it as scum, as Sun, because the scum is not visible on the headline, on the front page. And it says that China should be held to account over the Wuhan research laboratory that unleashed COVID. Now, this is not an accidental, objectively thought out editorial attack on China. This is part of the UK's current pretension on foreign policy. And I say pretension because the Dominic Raab, who is in post as Boris Johnson cabal's Minister for the Exterior, which is misleadingly called, the title is misleadingly called Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs, etc., has got the spin on currently in today's papers, allegedly showing concern about the persecution by the Chinese regime of Muslims inside China, especially in the Uyghur region, where the Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang province are being persecuted and have been persecuted. Now, remember, this is the man who was one of the, and is one of the staunchest, the most corrupt and stupidest proponents, propagandists against the UK's stay as a member of the European Union. And this is the same Raab who has been appointed to that post by the proven serial anti-Muslim inciter of hatred, Boris Johnson. I mean, this is currently the position that Johnson has refused and continues to refuse to apologize for inciting hatred against Muslims. generally and against Muslim women wearing the head gear or head coverings. Of course, Johnson incited hatred against the Muslim women wearing the burqa and deriding them for looking like bank robbers. Took place almost a year or more before the pandemic forced the entirety of the world's population to wear face masks. What we have been pointing out is that if the Muslim women wearing the burqa or the head coverings look like bank robbers, then what does the entire population of the planet Earth look like when it puts on the mask, face mask, to avoid being infected by the virus? This is very important because it is a double kind of barreled attack on the truth by Johnson and his cabal. Dominic Raab, R-A-A-B, Raab, is a notorious racist and a notorious denier of the truth and the evidence. And Johnson's failure to actually uphold the rights of the Iranian-born British national Nazanin Zaghari Ratcliffe is a racist kind of act. He not only failed to help her, but he confounded her kind of plight at the hands of the Iranian regime by completely falsely telling a committee of members of parliament things that the Iranian regime used as confirmation that Nazanin was a British spy. This is not accidental. Boris Johnson is intentionally corrupt. So when Marcus Rashford elevates Johnson's name to Prime Minister, it cannot be real. It cannot be actually happening with an ordinary 23-year-old putting that tweet within minutes, literally, or within very short time after the so-called conversation took place this morning. It could only have been part of the script written by the Johnson administration or maladministration. And it, as I have said, shows the contempt for the truth by the Johnson cabal, because, first of all, the poverty of children and the lack of proper food for the children coming from low income, very poor backgrounds, that is intentional policy consequence, policy action. And in that tweet, they say that the image is what Boris Johnson told Marcus Rashford was unacceptable. He didn't say the poverty was unacceptable. So Rashford, despite the platforms that he has been given today by the Daily Mirror and even by the Sun Inside, has lost his brains. He couldn't have had a lot of brains to begin with, because in his propaganda about poverty and low-income school meals and the rest of it, he left out the reasons. He left out the reasons and the process and the factors, policy factors, political factors that are active in creating and perpetuating and perpetrating poverty every single day in the UK. And today's tweet has confirmed that Rashford is already a stooge. Unless he explains the whole truth and how he came to be posting that untruthful, lying tweet that lets Johnson off the hook and his cabal off the hook, and doesn't talk about the policy behind the poverty of the children and poverty of the millions that are in poverty across Britain. We shall be, of course, talking contextually about poverty elsewhere and not necessarily referring to Marcus Rashford, who is going to be long forgotten before long. I mean, he is not going to sustain a campaign that is rigorous, that is honestly and evidentially, truthfully established. He is a short-lived wonder whose main peg has been the fact that he has been a football player. There are much more deeply thought and deeply expressed and deeply described comments and statements made against poverty by hundreds of people in this country who are not getting anything like the airing or the platform that Rashford has been given. The fact that he has got an MBE is also evidence that he is not in principle opposed to the likes of the British membership of Empire, British Empire membership, MBE, member of the British Empire, which is a disgraceful kind of thing to even put on somebody's name. So Rashford is not morally at all, contextually, evidentially justifiable as the originator of any campaign against poverty, including the one about school meals being not available to children. And as we have been saying, that is not something that should be ignored. The connection is that Rashford has been recruited by the Johnson-fronted cabal. And Dawn Foster, quote, a Guardian columnist or a Guardian writer, and she appears on various television slots, apparently doing reviews of the newspapers. As far as we have seen her contributions, Dawn Foster is not rigorous in systematically, morally, ethically, ideologically, evidentially rejecting the role of Fleet Street. Well, she can't be expected to, but that fact must be asserted that she has not. So the fact that she gets slots on BBC and Channel, Sky News Channel, etc., doing supposed reviews of the newspapers from Fleet Street proves the fact that she is actually part of the perpetuation of the lies and cover-ups and the denials of the truth by Fleet Street and by the mainstream media that are in cahoots in denying the truth to the people. Now, the Daily Express, which we have said before, is the legacy, the most poisonous kind of Fleet Street title left behind by the Canadian racist and liar Beaverbrook. The Beaverbrook's Express is continuing to pretend to be the same newspaper, so-called, that it was when Beaverbrook controlled it that is, outright racist, outright anti-democratic, outright anti-auditing of the makers of the decisions, and the fact that every day, the Daily Express of today, which together with the rest of Fleet Street, is not read anything like the numbers of people that would read the papers, because when there were no television and there were no internet. So those are the two diversions and kind of substitutes and alternatives available for people to seek the facts of what is going on. But having said that, even if the numbers reading or buying the newspapers like the Express are very small, whatever the number, it has to be asserted that regardless of the number of people buying or patronizing or advertising in the Express or any of its so-called circulation commercial rivals, these titles have the duty to tell the truth and nothing but the truth. And that is never done by Fleet Street. Never done. Every day, they've got a kind of confounded presentation of the news, which centrally lacks the truth and is completely contradictory. So the ordinary people, whoever they are and whatever title they actually buy or subscribe to, are being lied to every day. And today is no exception in the Daily Express, which we call for its role the daily suppress the truth. It says the UK records 1,243 more COVID deaths. Home Secretary vows to get tough. I mean, there is no evidence that she's getting anywhere near tough, or even is acknowledging the role of Boris Johnson, who traveled 7 miles to Stratford-in-Newham, 7 miles from the official Prime Minister's residence at number 10 Downing Street. It says Priti Patel says, I will find flouters putting nation at risk. Now, that's the headline on the Beaver Brooks poisonous lying daily suppress. It should have been said that action will be taken against Boris Johnson. Of course, that would be impossible for them to say, but that is what the facts say. And the imminent ouster of Donald Trump from the place in his own White House bunker is treated more accurately than the suppress is treating the behavior of Boris Johnson in biking 7 miles to Stratford to the east. Stratford is London E15 and number 10 Downing Street is Southwest 1, London Southwest 1. So from Southwest 1 to E15, he biked 7 miles. And even the Guardian was accommodating, capitulating to Boris Johnson's propaganda demands by not independently saying that Boris Johnson did bike all the way 7 miles to the east. It had a prevarication all throughout the piece at first, containing the so-called report about Johnson doing the 7 mile bike ride to Stratford. And the Express is continuing to give good news headline. This one on page 6, more than 2 million have had the vaccine. As infections start to slow. But then in the subheading underneath it, it corruptly says, turnaround needed to save overrun National Health Service. Now, if the thing is slowing already, the infection, spread of the infection is slowing, then why do they say turnaround is needed? Should be obvious, logically. So they are actually looking for any excuse, put a gloss, but then understate the truth that the gloss is denying. And then they've got a piece on the pages 8 and 9, which is headline, Children Deserve Better Than This. And then underneath that is a subheading. It says Rashford's fury over poultry parcels meant to feed youngsters for 10 days. Now, nowhere in there is there any evidence of any admission by the liars at the Express that the inadequate food parcels are caused by the Boris Johnson fronted cabal, denying the truth. And there is a piece in the Express by this woman who is misleadingly called Jack Monroe. And it is funny that she has been given a space in the Express, because everything that she claims to support and represent is opposed by the Daily Express. And there is a piece at page 12, which says social media barons strike at the very core of free speech. This is absolutely untruthful headline. Not that social media barons are not striking at the heart of free speech all the time, but this one is timed and coinciding with the propaganda by Trump and other fascists and racists after Twitter mainly stopped allowing Trump to tweet anymore. And there is an editorial about pension, which is completely untrue and untruthful and misleading, and it doesn't talk about the real cause of poverty being caused by the government and by local councils. We shall be talking about the robbery of the pensions by the local councils and the complicity in that robbery by the big charities, including the one that is used to be called Age Concern. And there is a piece about a council clerk unfairly axed over bond with married councillor. Now, where is that one? A deputy town clerk branded a gold digger after forging a close relationship with a married councillor was unfairly dismissed by council chiefs. A tribunal has ruled. Jane Woodward was seen as a femme fatale after becoming close to Councillor Roger Peat, 64, while his wife was in care home suffering from Alzheimer's. Rosemary died last October, just before Miss Woodward's unfair dismissal claim against Barnard Castle Town Council in County Durham started. Miss Woodward, who is in her early 40s, now stands to win significant damages. Now, we're not reading the rest of it, except to point out that this is unrepresentative of the role and the behavior of the council, tribunals. Because tribunals, as part of the corrupt judiciary, are as racist as the rest of the court bureaucracies, like county courts, magistrate courts, crown courts, high courts, and various divisions of the high court. The most populous one, that is to say, the one that carries the largest number of claims and litigation, is the Queen's Bench Division, is absolutely undeniably racist and corrupt, and it affects millions of people. So we shall be talking more about the whole corrupt judiciary another time or later. And there is a tribute by somebody in Los Angeles, somebody whose name appears as the writer, Peter Sheridan. And the headline is, Robin was the bravest man in the world, playing hardest role of his life. When Robin Williams committed suicide 6 years ago, it was a tragedy that even those close to him struggled to understand. The comic genius who had made the world laugh was a secretly tormented soul, driven to the brink by his inner demons, or so it seemed. Only after his death had his shocked family and friends discovered that the 63-year-old actor had been suffering from an undiagnosed neurodegenerative brain disease that plagued him with dementia, hallucinations, and paranoia. Now, this is, of course, a correctly kind of made statement about somebody whose life ended in that tragic way. But the Express has not ever published anything like that about the thousands of people in Britain who had been caused to commit suicide by the UK government, which withheld their badly needed help and benefit and forced them to starve. And the thousands that committed suicides could not cope with that. So they were forced to commit suicide. So it was a massacre by the UK government. But the Daily Express has never, ever given anything like that kind of space to the fact of the suicides that were caused by the government, let alone the actual impact and implication. And there, the Express is also running a piece about the exercise that dogs benefit from. If people walk with their dogs, the dog's heart benefits apart from anything else. Now, the front page on the Daily Mail today, Wednesday, the 13th of January 2021, is very clear. as the headline says, Queen's cousin in sex assault at Royal Castle. Now that's not the headline that they would have given if they were running a story about Brenda, that is the monarch, current monarch Elizabeth II, Brenda's son Andrew. Because over the years that Andrew has been exposed as having been the beneficiary of a gang of criminals raping children effectively. Trafficked to the islands owned by Epstein. And yet Brenda has stood by him repeatedly making appearances with him that show him in the most possible positive light. And the Daily Mail has not condemned Brenda's role, let alone published any accounts comparing the various criminality with the shelter that Brenda has given to Andrew. And there are other allegations floating around and accessible online and publicly about Andrew's criminality and crimes against children. And the Daily Mail has not published any of that. What the Daily Mail has done in our language is tickles. They've tickled Buckingham Palace. They haven't even named Brenda, the monarch, but Buckingham Palace tickled. And the tickling has mainly been embarrassment for the palace, not embarrassment for Brenda, whom they call Her Majesty. Back to the COVID-19 and the lockdown. They are saying on pages 4 and 5 that new lockdown curves could be days away. That is, new curves, higher curves, stricter restrictions on movement is about to be imposed in the next few days. And they're saying, of course, another story that if people don't wear a mask, then they won't be allowed into the main shops like the Sainsbury's. And the police are apparently saying to the government, to the politicians, to make the restrictions rules clearer. Now, this is again brazenly shameless and irresponsible and corrupt of the Daily Mail, because the rules are not clear as felt and known by ordinary people. It's not the police only. Ordinary people don't know what the rules are and how many rules there are and how many contradictions there are. And the Daily Mail is not saying any of that. It is giving credit to the police for something that ordinary people have been aware of for more than a year now, or calendar years. If we treat the calendar years as being years in counting. And then there is a sketch by the Daily Mail's corrupt sketch writer Henry Deeds. The spelling of the name Deeds, D-E-E-D-E-S, suggests that he might be related to Bill Deeds, who was the editor of what is now the Daily Borisgraph for a very long time. And he is giving full blasted promotion to Priti Patel, the interior minister, and giving her credit for being the enforcer. And here is the first paragraph. Entered the enforcer, Priti Patel slowly click-clacked into yesterday's Downing Street press conference, lower jaw out, forearms bared, camera lens fixed with her best let's be having a glare. She had come to lay down the law. Too many people were flouting lockdown rules, or as she put it, breaching regulations. So once again, the Home Secretary was swinging her truncheon, and this time she was cracking skulls. What a complete, absolute rubbish. So this is a propaganda piece by the Henry Deeds, despite the fact that he pretends in the copy to be aware of the criticisms, some criticisms that have been made against Johnson and his cabal. And it's not referring, Henry Deeds is not referring to the fact that the facts of the virus, as we have been saying it, the facts of the virus, A to Z, are being kept secret from the public. And it's the same today as it has been from day one. What they're doing instead is imposing an image that suits the propaganda purpose and tactics for the Johnson-fronted cabal. And the suppression of the facts is being done with the collusion and complicity of the creepy Keir Starmer fronting the so-called opposition in parliament. Because Starmer is not saying anything like what we are saying. Of course, what we are saying, nobody else is saying. Nobody else is saying, and we say it on the record. We haven't seen anything, even 10% of what we are saying, being said by any platform that we can access at the present time. And we have been able to access or visit so far. And there is a continuation of the item on the Boris Graf business section about Bitcoin. British Bitcoin owners lost an estimated 4.4 billion as the market crashed in a brutal weekend rout. Around 1.9 million UK punters who own the digital currency were hit by average paper losses of £2,300 each when its price plunged 25% over 3 days, according to Daily Telegraph calculations based on data from the Financial Conduct Authority. On the front page of the Daily Boris Graph, there is again an unexpected headline or heading, which says general practitioners, that is, doctors who operate or run businesses for groups of patients that they register and are paid by the National Health Service, are called GPs or general practitioners in this country, in the UK. So they are saying the general practitioners, according to the Boris Graph, that vaccine rollout is being slowed down by the government, which is fronted by the Johnson-fronted cabal. And there is a second cartoon in a row by Matt, which is acknowledging the truth about Boris Johnson flouting the rules. And it says that there is Boris Johnson, one of his local Land's End to John O'Groats bike rides. Now, Land's End and John O'Groats are two ends of the UK, the mainland. So it's a complete travesty to call that a local bike ride. So they're doing the kind of, they're mocking Boris Johnson and exposing, that cartoon is exposing Boris Johnson's lying. And there is this fascist woman, fascist, racist, anti-Muslim Alison Pearson is talking like a zombified machine of Trumpist propaganda, talking falsely about freedom. And she's saying that freedom must not be withheld a day longer than is necessary. Now, that is the propaganda against the lockdown and restrictions. She'll be coming to that in a minute. Before we do that, here is a headline on the top of the Boris Graph of today, Wednesday, the 13th of January 2021, about David Barclay. David Barclay must have been one of the two Barclay brothers who owned the Boris Graph and who bought the political service of Boris Johnson to the agenda that they supported. And they paid Johnson millions of pounds over the last 15 years, if not for longer. And on page 27, in the actual copy of that piece about David Barclay, we are not talking about his title, we're talking about his Barclay, David Barclay. That is the huge piece they've given to him. Now, Barclay is described as owner of the Telegraph Group, who with his twin, that is his brother Frederick, rose from humble beginnings to build a wide-ranging business empire. So he's a business imperialist. And it is they said that he was aged 86 years old, and that he, with his twin, that is twin brother Frederick, owned the Boris Graph since 2004. And he said that he was identical in appearance, lifestyle, and often even in dress with his brother. The Barclay brothers operated as one throughout their active business career, while doing their utmost to avoid personal publicity and discourage media scrutiny. Now that tells the truth. That is not intentional, but that tells the truth that they actually avoid media scrutiny, which is the core of our interest. Why did the twins buy Boris Johnson politically? The answer is that they were corrupt. And they corrupted the part of British politics that they are bribing and buying of Boris Johnson represented and could achieve, and they did achieve a lot of damage to democracy and accountability and the need to oppose racism and corruption in public life and in society. The Daily Boris Graph bribed Johnson openly and shamelessly, despite the fact that they themselves wanted to stay hidden in terms of their own personal lives. And there is a piece in the Boris Graph inside on page 16 which says, like night follows day, another left-wing lobby gets an Oxbridge job. That is totally corrupt and stupid. And they're saying in a piece by Jonathan Sumpton, who is described as a former Supreme Court judge. Now, this is a dubious kind of former Supreme Court judge, and we shall have a look at him right now. Sumption is saying it's not the police's job to enforce the lockdown whims of ministers. There is a difference between law and guidance, but the two are being dangerously conflated. And they are describing him as a historian and a former Supreme Court judge. And he's saying there is a good deal of evidence that in spite of the high levels of support for the current lockdown, compliance is lower than it was in the first lockdown. This is because many people are making their own judgments about the risk. Some of their decisions may be foolish. Most are probably perfectly sensible. Indiscriminate toughness by the police is not the answer. It will only make the regulations look even more arbitrary than they already are and reduce compliance still further. Now, I don't see anything in Sumption's opinion that actually realizes the truth itself. Because Sumption is blaming the government, which is correct for him to do on the evidence, but he's not himself telling the truth. And the truth is that there is no movement, there is no forum, including the judicial bureaucracy, that has the option or access available to the public who are supposed to observe government rules and guidance or whatever. And the judicial bureaucracy, which is corrupt and has been corrupt for centuries, is responsible for failing and refusing to hold to account wrong government decisions and government failures and negligence. And the biggest failure and negligence on the part of the government fronted by Boris Johnson and fronted by his predecessors is the biggest public cause for public sector failures and negligence affecting people's lives and safety is the failure of the judicial bureaucracy to find faults with the government defying its duties as required by the international treaties. Quite apart from the European Union agreements, there are literally hundreds, if not thousands of treaties that the UK remains signed up to, which, despite the fact that the UK remains signed up to them, which are being ignored, defied by the UK. Now, the reason why this is important is this. If the UK or any similar state had observed these required regulations and requirements, then the level of service to the people in health sector in the context of the current pandemic, and in education sector, in housing and in other parts of society would have been very much better, indescribably better than they are today, and they have been all this time, all these decades. And sometimes, of course, like Marcus Rashford doesn't want to lose his spot. He doesn't want to lose the platform, because since becoming a retired Supreme Court judge, he has cultivated a sub-career for himself, which is profitable, because this piece is not written for free. The Boris Graf is paying him handsomely. And so therefore, he doesn't want to lose that kind of platform and that kind of earning. It is as brazen as that. So he is lying. He's not lying altogether. He is kind of tickling with the truth of the government failure and the failure of the court's bureaucracy, of which he remains a beneficial kind of part. Although he is retired, but he is part of the bureaucracy, and he is described as a part of the bureaucracy, a retired Supreme Court judge. That is his selling point. That is his marketing. His marketing tag. Now, yesterday, there was a piece in the Murdoch Scum on, not yesterday, it was on Monday, on page 13. And it talked about Bin Laden's top aide, free in the UK. Now that and today's Daily Boris Graph piece by retired Supreme Court Judge Jonathan Samton are related. Because that one about bin Laden's top aide, free in the UK, is talking about legal aid and the rest of it, and the claim that this father of six living with his wife and children in a nearly multi-million pound council or public house. That gives an impression that is made up of four facets of lies. First of all, the money, that they're saying that he got legal aided representation. He didn't get the money himself. It went to the licensed law traders. So that's a lie. And secondly, if he has got 6 children and a wife, so that makes 8 of them. People living in a property, 8 persons living in a property, and especially currently in COVID, which requires specific distancing and other issues that need to be complied with. The property at the current market rates and value would have to be sufficient space-wise for all of them to live healthily and safely. So to put the price in a million kind of pound term suggests that they are intending to show that he is unfairly benefiting, which he should not be benefiting from such a housing. And they're showing him as a kind of almost like a business person. And they're calling him evil. Now, if he's served his terms and if he's been released from prison or detention in the USA on health grounds, then their decision to call him evil is not based on any evidence that he was found to be evil, except their racism and anti-Muslim agenda. So that is their kind of criminal intention. And then they're talking about the fact that he got the dad of 6 has quickly settled back into life with wife Raga, 59, at their 1 million council house in northwest London after 22 years behind bars. Now, that is not the truth of what has happened with him. If they have been detaining him for 22 years behind bars, then for 22 years, the family has been in battle against his detention and all the other things, and they're not recognizing him as a human being. And they're saying that the Metropolitan Police want a notification to be attached to him, a notification in effect suggesting that he is a criminal, he is a danger. Now, they haven't said what actually he did as Osama bin Laden's spokesperson or aide that was illegal, unlawful, against the human rights and against the safety of society. And I think that that is the fault of the legal system, because he can't practically take any action for incitement of hatred against him with any expectation that the judicial bureaucracy would uphold his claim against the son. The son is not talking about the numbers of people who have been killed by Trump supporters, the American police and American racists and others attacking Muslims across the world. Even when Dominic Raab is exploiting the fact that the Chinese have been persecuting Muslims in the Uyghur region of Xinjiang province. Apart from Dominic Raab's strategic kind of reference to the Chinese persecution of the Muslims, there is no recognition anywhere else in Britain or in Fleet Street about the persecution of the Muslims in China and by China. Or, for that matter, persecution of Muslims by any other country or government or state, or about the persecution of other people on the grounds of their own religion, Christianity and other faiths. So Fleet Street and Dominic Raab is getting the spot in the Fleet Street papers, including in the Times. There is no mention whatsoever of the actual persecution and the denial of human rights in any other parts of the world and any other context, even about China. And there is, of course, no reference to the fact that Boris Johnson is an incumbent in the post of Prime Minister in Britain as a result of an election which he benefited from, or which he actually won by benefiting from his record as an inciter of hatred against Muslims. It's the incitement of hatred against Muslims in addition to his attack on Muslim women wearing the headscarf. The incitement that Boris Johnson calculatedly indulged in as part of his big kind of spin for Brexit was by referring to untruthfully and dishonestly and intentionally dishonestly and untruthfully scaring the gullibles of Little England in June 2016 into voting for Brexit. Otherwise, they were told Britain was about to be invaded by millions of Turks. So what Johnson said there was that Turkey, which never was a member of the European Union and will never be a member of the European Union in the foreseeable decades, that Britain and Britain's independence from the EU was absolutely necessary for the very survival of the English people from an occupation by the millions of Turks who were going to invade Britain via the EU. Now that was a multifaceted lie calculatedly perpetrated by Boris Johnson and calculatedly ignored by the entirety of Fleet Street, including the Daily Mirror and the Guardian, all of which are at one when it comes to hostility to the general idea of Muslims. Not about any particular ideology, not about any particular kind of action by any Muslims, but Muslims because of the faith, for the allegiance, for the identity as Muslims. That is an offense, according to Boris Johnson. That is fair ground for attacking Muslims and telling lies against Muslims. As lethal as lying about the Turks, millions of Turks taking over England if England didn't do the Brexit, which was the single most important factor propelling the gullibles at the June 2016 EU referendum to get UK out of the EU. That was the one that got more than half of the people to vote to get out of the EU, because otherwise the Muslims would take over England. Now, it's not just Boris Johnson. Even this woman from Lebanon, who is supposedly the editor of the Financial Times, she is running this piece about the Turkish president on the front page, which is actually on page 5 in the detail. It's running the piece about Erdogan's great game, soldiers, spies, and Turkey's quest. And it's on page 5, and there is a fertile ground of anti-Turkish hostility in Fleet Street, including even in the Financial Times. And it's saying that Erdogan overtures to West clash with drive to make Turkey great again. Financial Times series, President's muscular foreign policy has left Ankara more isolated and angered NATO allies. Now, of course, this is like accusing Erdogan and the Turks of being like Donald Trump. This is completely, to talk about Turkey or any country objectively, factually, truthfully, is perfectly not only acceptable but must be done every day. But this piece on the Financial Times against Erdogan's presidency is intentionally false and misleading, and is intended to make Erdogan look the person or the president at fault for Turkish isolation by the NATO and other forces. So this is an anti-Muslim crusader agenda that the Financial Times is running. It's an agenda that is intended to isolate Turkey from the surrounding neighbor states and from the West. And it is part of the crusader agenda that has been going on for centuries. It's not about any act of terrorism that Turkey is engaged in, or any act of anti-human rights activities by any group of Turkish people. That may be the case in relation to some elements, But the attack on Turkey is not about attacking or opposing any particular terrorist act or any violations of human rights by anyone supporting Turkey. It's an attack on Turkey as a Muslim state. In comparison with Turkey and its treatment by the likes of Boris Johnson and others, the state of Saudi Arabia is treated very differently indeed, and has been treated very differently for decades. Even through the years when the death of the princess was shown and Saudi Arabia was condemned for being responsible for torturing and persecuting and massacring and hanging women and other human rights people. As compared to the treatment of Libya's Gaddafi and Iraq's Saddam Hussein by the West, the Saudis have been friends with the big business and military industrial complex, which has been pocketing trillions of dollars from the Saudis. And there is no evidence, there is absolutely, objectively speaking, there is no evidence that any of the Fleet Street papers bothers about this. And there should be. There should be bothering about this, because trillions of dollars and the pound equivalents could have solved the problem of the crisis of the National Health Service in Britain and their counterparts in the Western European countries. And there could be no poverty anywhere near as bad and as deep as is the case in Britain and has been the case in Britain for decades. That's why it is so important to point out in this diagnosis, world exclusive diagnosis, the corruption and criminality that is Fleet Street, the British papers and British media, betraying the British people, the gullibles, and exposing the British people, the gullibles, to serious risk, deadly risks every time.